Hope I didn't break it here otherwise.
Technology is great.
Can be.
Technology is great. Oh, it's like
That should be on.
Does one of us have a speaker? Or is it the TV? I hope that's not a speaker.
Okay, we're streaming.
Thank you.
Sounds
All
good.
right, it is 5:07 on Monday, June 13th, and I will call to order a special meeting of the Red Wing School Board. So we have Holly Tower, Jim Bryant, Arlen Dierks, Jennifer Tift, Pam Rowe, and myself, Anna Ostendorf, present. Nicole Buck is not here. And this special meeting is to discuss potential candidates for interim superintendent. We will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so as a special meeting, there's nothing else that we can talk about during this meeting other than our interim superintendent search.
And to the republic.
And what I wanted to start with, I wonder if I can share my screen to show you guys what I did, or if I can just share it when I have it done. So I made a list of, A through K. So we have to have 11 candidates. Each has been assigned an alphabetic letter. And how I thought we could start this is to go around and each of us name any of those candidates that you definitely want to interview or that you maybe want to interview. And so I made a little, I'll try to share it if I can figure out how to do that as we're going through it. Just like a little spreadsheet so that if a definitely want to interview can be a 2, a maybe want to interview is a 1, and then I'll just leave it as a 0 if you don't name them, and then use that to kind of tabulate, and maybe we'll see that there are, 2, 3, 5 candidates that all of us are kind of in agreement on. Those pull out the highest. Maybe we're all over the board and we have to have more of a conversation about it, but I thought we at least start with those kind of initial perceptions, each of us sharing those candidates that we most want to interview or ones that we're kind of on the fence about, and then just kind of see how that shakes out and go from there. That was my plan.
I was thinking, did you do it on Google Docs?
Yes, I did.
So maybe you could share it with Charlie and he could present the screen and you could keep you on.
Sure.
Charlie, you think that would work?
It's Lisa, you need to be on
Why-
vacation.
Why is
Lisa.
Charlie isn't the host, so
Okay.
that's the problem.
Oh, got it.
But he's still gonna share.
We can tabulate ourselves too.
But you can still
Yeah.
share if you're not the host. You just can't.
Yeah, anyone could share.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, there you go.
So if she shared it with you, then you can present the screen.
I
What I was-
could do that.
You're not coming up in my list for me, Charlie. What's your middle initial?
B as in boy.
There you are. Okay. Found you. And this spreadsheet does not have candidate names attached. It's just the A through K. So it's totally fine to share like that. So yeah, if you're able to share that, Charlie, that would be awesome. That way we can all kind of see it at the same time. And if this doesn't work, if it doesn't help us, narrow it down, we don't have to use it. I just thought it was one way to kind of hopefully narrow it in as quickly as possible. So I put us in there alphabetically. So Mr. Bryant, you are first. If you are ready with
Sure,
who you wanted to definitely or maybe interview.
absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Took considerable amount of time over the weekend to, look at them all and investigate them all a little bit, my other background, my other job. I come up with, I'm gonna say 4 that I'm interested in.
Okay.
And I'd like to, I'm not gonna say, we can't say he or she, you're right, by the letters. I'm interested in repeat that, starting over. B as in boy,
Okay,
I as in Ida, A as in Adam, and C as in Charlie. Those are my 4. B, I,
Yep.
A, and C. The other ones, thank you for applying. Those are the 4 to kind of whittle it, get it down to a number that's manageable.
Nikki is not here. Mr. Dirks, would you like to?
Yeah, I sure would love to share my ideas here. Do you want just, 3, 4, what do you want?
Whatever ones if you have ones that you definitely want to interview, and then if you have ones, I mean, I think if we can keep it to like 5 each, that would be ideal. But if you only have like 2, that's fine. If you
Well,
have,
I put them all in kind of order here.
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna say A and B are about equal to me, probably my top choices to interview.
Okay.
Not that I don't want to interview others, but.
Okay.
And then D and I were my other 2, which were right up there too, so.
Okay.
That
D
makes
as in
sense what I'm
dog.
saying?
Yep,
D as in David?
A and B I rated it, to me, were my top on resume, and then D as in dog, and I as in Isabel.
I don't know all the letter things.
There's no Isabel in here, so I'm all right saying that.
Ida is what I think.
Do you want the other side, those that I'm not really interested at all? I don't think you're really good.
Let's not at this point.
All right.
If we get to discussion where we're weeding out, if there's something that someone that a person definitely doesn't want to interview and somebody definitely does, maybe we need to have a conversation about that, but let's just kind of see where this goes from that. So my top, picks, and I could go into the whys when we get to a discussion if it comes to that. D, F, I, and K. I think that was 4. And I had some maybes. I can take those out for now and put them back in if,
Charlie, is there any way you can make that screen a little bigger for us? My old eyes can't see that.
I'm looking at the other side.
It's 100% up.
Awesome.
That's a little better.
That is much better, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Rowe, you're next.
Yes, well, I'll tell you, this was a lot of interesting reading over the weekend, and we are very fortunate to have this many excellent candidates. So I just need to say thank you to the people who took the time to apply. You are making our job very difficult because there are so many great candidates, so thank you for that. My top 4 that I would say in no particular order would be I, B, A, and K.
I, B, A, and K. All right.
And quite honestly, if we had no time constraints, I would love to sit down with all of these folks, honestly, and have a great conversation with you because there's a lot of passion out there, and Minnesota and our educational world is very lucky to have all of you, so thank you.
Yeah, I felt the same as Thompson. All right, Ms. Howard.
Yes, I have two.
Okay,
I myself did a lot of reading and I picked B and A.
okay. And Ms. Teft.
As Ms. Rose said, thank you very much for applying. This was difficult. Impressive, and as I was reading through, I just felt really thankful that so many people qualified people wanted to apply for this position, so I appreciate that. In no particular order, I thought A, D, I, and K.
What was your second one? I couldn't hear you.
D,
Thank you.
I, and K. And then I did have a couple of maybes, as I said, it was really difficult.
So just based on this little spreadsheet thing, A and I would come to the top. And then kind of next up is B. So if we stopped at 3 candidates, those were the 3 we would have. The next 2 that would come out in the rankings would be, looks like D and K. So do we want to do, I'm open to conversation at this point. Yes, Mr. Bright.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we could sit here all night and praise each one of these candidates, like everybody said. Thank you for applying 11 in a short time. It's amazing, so to speak. You know, how many do you imagine in 7 days you get 11 people? So thank you, everybody. We initially talked about doing 1 to 3 interviews, and I think if we stay with 3, due to our time constraints, we probably be well served to find one person out of those top 3 that you appointed a score for. So that's my take. I'd say we just do up to the top 3, or the top 2, whatever you want to do. I think we can't go wrong by doing the top 3.
Is there anybody who feels strongly about going beyond those top 3?
I don't want to say I feel strongly going beyond. I'm very comfortable with the top 3. My concern would be if any of them could not make the interview or want to drop out or something, then we limit ourselves down. It's just a thought, but I think I'm very comfortable with 3 because any one of them with resumes, that's all we got at this point. I mean, as everybody said, there's many, many quality candidates here. And I only came down to 3 or 4 that didn't really stand out in the whole thing. So even the others, but it's just something that I'm putting out is, do you want to have more in case somebody drops out, or you want to stay with 3 and then you limit yourself a little bit?
Ms. Howard?
I just wanted to say, I really appreciate you putting this together. This cut off a whole bunch of time for us to count things and double count. So it's pretty clear to me that the top 3 kind of stand out. I'm okay with 3. If the numbers were just a little bit closer, but they're not. So I'm okay with 10, 10, 8. As am I.
Ms. Dick? I am too. I was just wondering if we were able to get Nikki's input at all.
I have not heard from Nikki, so I'm not sure. I'll double check my email here and just make sure I don't have one.
I recall her saying that she was unavailable for the 12th.
Okay.
24th. So. Now, that could have changed, but you're right, I didn't hear anything. Did anybody else?
I did not.
So. We would love to have her input,
Yeah, for sure.
however, we have to go forward.
Right.
So, and going to Mr. Dirks' question, or, thought, I get that, however, they all were aware of the change of the interview date too, so let's hope that all the 3 that we have, elected to interview will follow through with that, and join us at some point for the interview.
Mr. Gear?
I'm comfortable with the three, but as another idea, just to throw it out there, I'm not pushing for it, maybe we could have an alternate. If we want to have three at the interview, I don't know if that's the number everybody wants to interview three, so, I mean, that's the other thing would be, have two other alternates, if somebody tells Hannah they can't make it, then another one would fill in the order.
Well, the next two are kind of tied, so I don't know who we would,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? D and K are tied.
It's just plain difficult, I don't know. I'm in uncharted trip territory here, just like the rest of us.
I understand it, but we talk about anywhere from 1 to 3, so 2 drop out, whenever you want. We're not
Kind of a
having,
natural,
go back.
That's right. I think that's fair.
I like the uneven.
All right, okay.
Do we need a
so-
motion or anything?
Sure,
Or
wouldn't hurt, right, to have a motion
what
to
would be the
interview?
procedure here?
Make a motion to offer interviews to candidate A, B, and I,
I
starting
second
at 5 PM on June 27th.
that.
We have a motion by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Tower, to interview candidates A, B, and I, beginning at 5 PM on June 27th.
Just a question.
Yes.
Unrelated to this, but not involved in the motion, we talked about questions.
Mhm.
We don't want to talk about, we don't want to list, hey, we want to ask this question. So we need, is that part of the special meeting tonight to talk about the process of gathering questions?
Yeah, yep, let's do that after we decide this piece. Any other discussion about the motion? Okay, we're all in person, so all those in favor say aye.
I,
All those opposed say nay. So that carries 6-0. All right, I will, connect with Amy and contact these candidates. And do that next step for them. So yes, then, the next thing is the structure of the interview. And, I agree, it gets a little bit sticky to have the conversation about what questions we want to ask, because we don't want to like give everybody all the questions right now, but yet we can't discuss them without it being an open meeting. So, I guess one way that we could do it is if, each person sends me the questions that they would like to have asked, and then I can, just make the list, and send it back out. And, we can't exactly give feedback then, but I guess maybe we could do similar to this if we kind of assign like numbers to the questions, or I could, try to combine ones that seem connected, and then maybe at our meeting next week, say like, I think question 1 should for sure be asked, not so concerned about question 2, or you know what I mean, like,
I was thinking 2 questions, each 2 for 12, but not that we want 12, but like if we generated each 2 questions and then narrowed it down. I mean, I don't know if we want each to ask a question at the meeting,
Yeah, you do.
right?
Get involved.
So then it would be,
another thing to think about with structure, is because of the nature of it being an open meeting, typically if you were to interview, candidates A, B, and I, you would interview candidate A, you would interview candidate B, you would then interview candidate I. But in some ways, that gives a little bit of an unfair advantage to candidate B who's watching interview A happen, So one thing I thought I'm just kind of pulling this out of thin air, so open to thoughts about it. If we interviewed all of them kind of at the same time, like when we did like the candidate forum, it rotated through. So the first question, the first person gets asked first, and then the second person has a chance, third person has a chance. The second question starts with the second person, so that way everybody is a little bit in the hot seat, at one point, but it's maybe a little bit more fair. And they're all gonna ultimately be, able to watch it anyway. So it doesn't, in this context where we can't really have a private interview, I don't know that having them all interview together is necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know that it's the best way to do it either. I was just trying to think through ways to make it, I guess, as fair as possible. And then I think it's important too that when we ask questions that each of us, so like, let's say I have a question that I'm gonna ask, but I ask that question of each of the three with the same wording and all of that. And then, you know, if you have your questions that you're gonna ask, you ask that question of all three, regardless of whether we interview all three of them at the same time or individually, just so that we're sure that the delivery was the same and, you know, the wording was the same and all of that. That was my other thought with that, but I don't know. I see I have some raised hands. I don't know if it was necessarily for this. Mr. Yerkes, I have you.
Oh, I didn't
first
take mine
from last.
down.
Okay. Ms. Tipp?
I was just wondering if MSBA has sample questions.
They have not given me them, but I will ask. And I did talk to Amy French about this a little bit, just, you know, she has kind of her standard questions that she has. So she'd be happy to give us those as well. And I did think if we have a list of questions, that it would be good to run them by her, just to make sure that there's nothing that, you know, is a violation. You know, she knows what the rules are for what you can and cannot ask. And I think a lot of us have been in the position of being a hiring interviewer. So most of us probably know, but just to make sure that, you know, we don't inadvertently cross any lines that we shouldn't. Ms. Wright.
Thank you. Yeah, with technology nowadays and how we do this, the times we interviewed the county administrator position twice, we just had him sitting in front of us with no streaming.
Mm.
That person came in, and the next one came in,
Mhm.
we scheduled them, 1 o'clock, 1:45, whatever.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that, we probably have to record it,
Mhm.
but I'm not so sure we have to stream it.
We don't.
So I like your, the thing is fine, but we may have somebody that'll be virtual.
Right. I'm assuming several of them will be, but I don't know.
So, as much as I'd like to have them all together at one time, I think I'd be more comfortable interviewing them individually.
Time.
And then, record it, but not stream it, and then, we stream when we announce the choice.
And have scheduled times for
Pardon
each
me?
one. And have scheduled times for
Yeah.
each one, so that, yeah. I like that idea.
And I think, the questions are, 2 apiece is not,
I think, yeah, that might even be too much.
I believe Nikki will be here,
Right.
Right.
so 14's a lot, or maybe we want to do 11 and then rotate, if you only did one time, the next time. But, you really want to have the same person
Yes.
asking the same question too, because you get the same meaning.
Yep.
So 14 might be long, but,
Well, I think-
it's worth our time to do it too.
I think if each of us had 2 questions, we might find that a lot of us have the same question,
Mhm.
you know? So if that works for everybody, to email me what your preferred questions would be, and then I can put them all together, send that out, so it's not a serial meeting, but it's just sharing the information, and then we can talk about it on Monday
So,
in our meeting.
get back to the scheduled times.
Mhm.
We don't know how long their answers are gonna be to our questions. Do we wanna do hourly, 5, 6, and 7?
Mhm.
That way it gives ample time for us to discuss a little bit if we want.
Yes, yeah, I like that.
I mean,
We don't want to be rushed. I think it's
No.
good to have a
We
good
don't have
amount of
anything else that
time.
night, correct? Yeah, that's the only thing we have.
so that's my suggestion, to go 5,
I
6,
like
and
it.
7, and just throw them in a hat, pick them out. This letter is 5, this letter is 6, and this letter is 7. Doesn't
Well,
matter.
and I would suggest we get here then a little bit early, like 4:45, so that,
You know, 5 o'clock person is a short
well,
time.
I'm always running late anyway. I'm speaking more for myself.
We'll put you back on daylight savings.
Thank you. Just so that I'm not coming in hot.
Uh-huh. Ms. Howard?
I was gonna say I like the idea of doing them one at a time. Group interviews have a much different dynamic. and alone, not a good or bad, it's just a much different dynamic, and I think with what we're trying to accomplish, I'd like to focus on one person at a time and give them ample time to kind of think through. How much in advance do we give them the questions
When they sit down.
when they sit down? Because most interviews I go to, I get them in advance. So like I get them a week in advance, I've gotten them like an hour in advance. I'm hearing Jim say cold, the cold run.
May I answer?
Sure.
Just one more thing. I like your idea of doing them separately, thank you, and I like the 5, 6, and 7. And I'm with you, I just have to show up earlier, so I'm not stressed when I walk in the door, like for me.
Well, we want to be here to,
Yes, I know.
to, I'm sure they're not walking in at 5 o'clock, you know.
Right,
Well,
Yeah, and I think we should have the protocol set so that if 2 people do or 3 people, they have different spaces they can go to. Like we have that organized ahead of time, like if you're waiting, you can wait in this room. And then if they're done, do they get to leave or do they have to wait till it's all done? Just some of those kind of logistical pieces. Yes, respond.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe in giving them cold questions because they're all been through it. They expect it that way. But, because we did, the candidate forums were cold, and, that's fine. I think they're all expecting that because that's what they've done before. And then my suggestion is you have somebody at the door if somebody comes in. You're right, put them in some area in case they get here an hour ahead of time from their scheduled time because they have time. They're not sitting in the background, so.
Although we can't, because it's an open meeting.
Right, but they'll understand.
Should, Mr. Dierks, you're in.
First, I think that's appropriate to have a place where they can sit and not attend a meeting, but at the other end, it is a public meeting, and anybody can attend a public meeting if they so desire and observe.
Yeah.
As much as I suspect that most candidates would probably not want to do it, it's just
Right.
the way things are, but we cannot do it. But I think that supplying an area where they could sit outside of the meeting would be appropriate, if they so desire. The other part is, I don't honestly know what kind of questions I even want to ask. I got lots of questions of what I'm looking for specifically in people, but being an interim superintendent and stuff, I don't know how far that's gonna go, but so I like the idea of hearing questions, everybody giving a couple. I think 14 is a lot. And the next thing is, I don't feel I need to ask the question. Anybody could ask the question. I'd be okay asking it because it's my particular one, but do we want to consider everybody having input and then one person doing the questions?
I think y'all should be involved in asking a question, whether, I agree with you.
Doesn't have to be my question.
It could be 10 questions and just rotate it on. I get that. Yeah, you're right. But I think everybody needs to ask. And then
I'm more concerned with the response and watching the response. That's how I'm going to probably judge.
But it also kind of comes across that the board is working all together on this whole issue instead of just one person focusing on the candidate with the questions. That's the board decision.
Well, and I think we need to think about, oftentimes when I've interviewed people, you have like a follow-up question. And those are really hard because then you should have the same follow-up questions. So, do we just ask the question and be done with it with no follow-up? Or if somebody asks a follow-up question, do we take notes so that we make sure that we ask the same exact follow-up question of the next person, which may or may not make sense to them because they may have already answered it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what's the best way to do that because sometimes we do, sometimes it does call for a follow-up question, and then what do you do?
Sometimes the follow-up question, like you said, wouldn't be pertinent to the next person.
Right.
Because the answer they gave you
Right.
is different.
I know that in interviews, when I ask the question, I often, if I want to hear more, I would say, is there more you could say about that? Or just kind of
Or if you don't understand, like, could you rephrase that, or could you repeat, what you said, I'm not sure I caught all of it, or something like that, or I think that,
Yeah. If it's the same question,
Right.
and when I was saying like two each, just two each to put in the bank, but that doesn't mean we pick 14.
Right.
It means we pick, if there's 7 of us, we pick 7 questions. If we decide we want to do 10 questions, I do think it's a good idea that we each ask, so that we each take notes and nobody has to singly focus on
the question.
the questions, and everybody can get a chance for the eye contact and the engagement. But I'm a big proponent of the same question. And if I'm the asker and I'm not so sure, I can follow up with, could you say more, or like, could you rephrase that? But I'm curious to know what you all think when you want to know more about that same question that I might have asked or that Jim might have asked. Should we allow that?
Oh,
Piece?
if you ask the question, I then
Yeah, it was
wanted the
like-
person to answer more.
Yeah, or, should that just be the
That's
open?
okay.
Yeah, like that should just kind of be the open system that we agree to.
Because ultimately, we really want to have a dialogue and a conversation with this person, so they really, and I'm assuming you will start, with, this is what the job is and it entails, and, what we're looking for, because they need to learn as much from us as we need to learn from them, so it does need to be a dialogue at some point as fairly as possible.
Don't think for a minute that they haven't studied us as well as much as
Right,
we've studied them.
study up.
Have you in the queue, did you?
That was my
Okay,
question.
Okay,
Me too.
okay.
That's the follow-up.
I did my very official names or letters in a hat, and it came out alphabetical, so A would be at 5, B would be at 6, I would be at 7.
That's.
I could have just done it alphabetically, I would have.
Where's your hat?
I just shook them up and threw them on the table and grabbed them at random. I think it was random,
So then, after we're done interviewing, are we gonna, is the plan then to discuss who,
27th? 28th, we're meeting again to make a.
to make a decision? And do we want to decide now or on one of those other 2 dates, the contract, negotiating the contract?
Yeah, we can decide that at any point, I think. I think probably sooner than later, but, we don't necessarily have to decide it tonight, but maybe we can decide that on Monday as well.
I think it would be good to give more time than less time to the negotiators so that they can look over the current contract and really understand what's in it and the sample interim contract that MSBA gave us, so that we really, whenever it's time to start negotiating, we don't have to say, well, I need another day to read through this carefully. So I think just sooner rather than later would be my recommendation.
Would it be a person or a committee?
Well, I think it has to be a committee. I don't know if it should be one.
And I think it would be good, I don't recall Barb saying this from MSBA, but to have Amy involved in it, just so that she can, be, because usually when we're doing the contract negotiations for, the union, the bargaining groups, it's us and Karsten who can then say okay, but actually we can't do that. Or, well, because of he knows the technicalities of that. I think there needs to be the person who understands that. So to have Amy, or if not Amy, somebody else who would
And
know that
Jack has to be
information.
dialed, because I think we need to understand too, benefits and salary and all of those things
Yeah.
that, what we can and what our
So maybe
parameters
Amy and
are.
Jackie, if she's available, and then,
Yeah, when Connie was in that, she knew all the contracts as Amy should have. And it's a
oh
good
yeah,
idea
Amy
to have
knows the
Amy
contracts.
aware.
Yeah.
I would think it would just be legal to have HR involved.
Yeah. And do we need to have a closed session to talk, with all of our other negotiation strategies, we talk about what our parameters are. Do we need a closed session to do that, to discuss that before we get into
The
the
offer, to discuss the offer once you.
Well, or what our parameters are. Yeah,
So maybe before and after?
yeah. Before, for sure,
Um,
is what I'm thinking, because that's what we do for all other negotiations.
We could still add a closed session to Monday's meeting, the 20th, to set parameters, and that would be before we even have.
And I don't even know that we do, I'm just asking the question. I don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah, that's a good idea. Do it Monday.
Is
Monday.
it possible that we just have Lisa or Amy send out the contract, so we all can be aware?
Well, we have I sent out the model contract.
I meant the current
Oh, the
one.
current one. It
Yeah.
is online.
Yes.
And yeah, we can send that
But
out.
just the language, just the pieces to it,
Yeah.
and we're at least all aware of what in front of us. What all goes into it, if there's more ask, or if there's,
Yeah, we could decide just what we want to do for whoever is involved, you know. What you want to do it for intro.
Um, Parameters. So I'll add a closed session to the end of the meeting, on Monday, the 20th, to discuss parameters for interim superintendent contract.
And again, I don't know that we need, I mean, maybe Amy can help us, maybe call her tomorrow and
Yeah.
see if that's even something we need. I mean, we can always have it on the agenda.
Yep,
if it's
and
not if needed, but,
Yep.
because it's gonna be dependent upon our candidates' experience and their lanes and their levels and
Yep,
all of that as well. So we probably need to have a wide range of parameters, but, you know, it still would be good to have a conversation that the seven of us can discuss and go into it knowing what the board feels.
And we do have just like a placeholder of interim superintendent search on the agenda for Monday already as well. Not as a closed session, but just to kind of give a recap of what's happened in this between today and Monday. Because I'll contact these candidates and I can give an update then if there's anything anyone needs to know, and for us to discuss those interview questions and things like that. Mr. Dirks?
Yeah, I think it's good to go in a closed session, probably to discuss what
The financial aspect.
parameters would be, but who's gonna get the information, present in the closed session on the parameters and where this is gonna come from. I'm just thinking the MSBA might have an idea of what interim superintendents go for. And I don't know if it's based on experience, there's two different things, maybe not, but I think an interim superintendent is a little bit different than a long-term superintendent. I don't know if you pay more, pay less, I think the basic structure of the contract would be similar to a long-term superintendent, just with a shorter time period, but it'd be nice to have some input on salary grid or something. I don't know where you find it, I just.
I'll ask MSB and see if they have it. Yeah, and I'll ask Amy and Jackie about being on the committee and for their input about this as well.
Anybody here been on negotiations for the Parsons contract? There's an experienced person. Was there a grid or anything that we work off in our district? It was just purely, this is
Past practice, and, well,
talking back and forth. and
yeah,
stuff.
just like any other group, it's
Not a-
been the same
Not a grid
conversation.
like what we had for teachers contract or
No, steps
principal
and lanes.
based on
no.
experience and steps. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
Was that?
That's
That was
why
what you were
I
thinking. Mr. Bright, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to keep track of where I'm at in that list, but okay, yes.
Yeah, great conversation, but we should probably I think we should save some of it for the closed session. Because people may
Trying
be
to get myself off here.
as to how we're gonna do
sounds good.
the negotiations.
Yep. Okay. Anything else to discuss tonight about the interim search? If not, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Rowe. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. That carries 6-0. We are adjourned at 5:40.